All right, members, I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 122 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, pursuant to Standing Order 108, Bracket 2. The motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 21st, 2023. The committee is resuming its study of policy decisions members, and market forces meeting that have led to increases in the cost of buying or renting a home in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait for speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation. For those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to our interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to the microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution, and when handling the earpieces, phone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of the interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone into which their headset is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table away from the microphone when they are not in use. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage. We appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses with us today. And with us on this study of policy decisions and market forces that have led to increases in the cost of buying or renting a home in Canada. We have with us the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Welcome, Minister. Great to have you here. And along with the Minister, we have the Deputy Minister for the Department of Finance, and that is Mr. Chris Forbes. Welcome, Deputy. Okay, and so we'll have time now for opening remarks, and then we will get into the members' questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I am pleased to appear before you and committee members today to talk about what is the top priority for millions of Canadians today. Housing is at the center of our economic plan. We are building more homes. We are making it easier for Canadians who wish to buy property. And we are supporting homeowners and tenants.
We have taken further concrete action. We're lifting the GST on new rental construction. Build. We unlocked $20 billion in new low-cost financing to build up to 30,000 new rental apartments per year. The federal government owns more land than anyone else in Canada, and we're releasing more of it to build homes on, including 2,600 homes in Calgary, Edmonton, St. John's, and Ottawa. Dans le cadre du Fonds pour...
Under the Housing Accelerator Fund, the province of Quebec, as well as 10 cities across the country. But that's not all. These agreements will reduce the red tape that prevents housing from being built. In exchange, we are providing dollars in funding to build more than 100,000 new housing units more quickly. We also helped more than 300,000 Canadians save up for their first down payment tax-free through the new First Home Savings Account.
In our fall economic statement, which I released just 2 weeks ago, we also introduced new funding and new measures which will build more homes and protect Canadians with mortgages. We're providing $15 billion in additional low-cost financing through the Apartment Construction Loan Program, which will help build 30,000 more rentals. Announced an additional $1 billion through the Affordable Housing Fund, which will help nonprofit, co-op, and public housing providers to build more than 7,000 new homes. We're cracking down on short-term rentals listed on sites like Airbnb and Vrbo, which have been keeping tens of thousands of homes off the market, particularly in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, where the housing challenge is most acute. And we're helping to cut the red tape that prevents construction workers from moving across the country to build homes, while also bringing to Canada more of
He also announced the creation of a new Canada Mortgage Charter. This new charter describes the additional latitude Canadians can expect from their banks if they run into financial difficulties. Our goal is to protect Canadians, ensuring that they receive the support they need to pay down their mortgage and keep their homes if they refinance their loans at a time when interest rates are higher. These measures, announced over the last 3 months alone, are just part.
The government has a real plan to build more homes faster across Canada. The Leader of the Opposition's proposal would actually see fewer homes built across the country. He would put the tax back on rental construction. He would cut funding to cities that are trying to build more housing. And he would repeat the mistakes of the past by pulling the federal government out of home building altogether. That is exactly the opposite right now. Our government has a plan, and we will keep working day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year to build the homes that Canadians need and expect and deserve. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the MPs on the committee. Thank you also to their family members. A particularly nice presence. And I am now happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister Freeland. And first round, Minister, the members have up to 6 minutes to ask questions for each party. We are starting with MP Howland for 6 minutes. Minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, have you seen our common sense Conservative leaders' brilliant 15-minute documentary on the housing held in Canada that's been viewed over 4 million times?
I am certainly familiar with the Conservative scheme on housing. I haven't watched the video itself.
Okay, so I would strongly encourage that you do watch it, because it's a common sense Conservative plan how to build more homes and not more bureaucracy. Be like, share, and subscribe so others can see a common sense Conservative plan on how to get housing fixed as well.
I'm happy to comment on the Conservative scheme today. In fact,
your government's housing agency, CMHC, says that 3.5 million additional homes need to be built in Canada. Your housing agency, the same one, the head of that agency says that, it said 2 days ago at the Senate Finance Committee, that your government has no plan to reach that number. In fact, in this committee, that same agency, your housing agency, says that that target is not attainable under current conditions because of high interest rates and because of higher costs that were caused by your government. In other words, your own housing agency has no faith in you or your government. If your own housing agency has no faith in you, why should Canadians?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Hallen. You asked me to comment on the Conservative scheme on housing.
I didn't ask you to comment on that. I made a comment.
In fact, invited me to. So let me comment.
I'd like to hear an
First of all,
answer
I
about-
would point out.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Mr. Halan, as he does every time the minister comes, asks a question or makes a statement and then refuses to allow the minister to answer. And so, Mr. Chair, I would just ask
I did
that
not ask about-
we allow the minister to answer the questions out of respect
thank
for
you.
the minister and the other
My
members of this
question was
committee,
not
but
about
also
the
the folks at home
documentary.
who are watching who would like to hear the answers.
The question is
Thank you,
about
MP
our
Baker.
department not having
MP
faith
Howland,
in you.
MP Howland, I am going to ask, like it did happen in the last meeting, a lot of crosstalk, you jumping in when you ask a question.
The question was not about the documentary.
Out of
The question was about
you
her
ask the
department
question
not having faith
out
in
of
her.
respect and out of respect to everybody that's here.
Minister, can you please
MP Howland,
answer
MP Howland.
why Canadians
The
should have
minister-
faith in you,
MP Howland.
even though your housing
MP
agency
Howland.
doesn't? That's the question.
MP Howland.
I've asked my question.
MP Howland. You asked a question. Allow the witness to answer the question.
She's not
the
answering
witness
the
didn't
question.
answer your question.
Point of
So-
order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
Not only is that irrelevant and untrue, and they're not answering the question, you shut me down by adjourning the meeting improperly. So could you please let Conservatives speak? I know you don't want to hear it as a Liberal. I know you don't want to hear about the housing hell, and you should watch
Lawrence.
the video too. I might add.
MP Lawrence,
Chair, I'll ask my question again. Let's move on. I will ask my question again. It's my time, Chair. I will ask the question
In fact,
again.
actually,
Minister,
let me
your
just
housing
say,
agency has no faith
I believe
in
that
your
MP
plan.
Howland
Why
asked me
should
a question.
Canadians?
I certainly believe the point of this exercise is for him to ask me a question. He offered quite a long
Questions on the table
preamble
3
with
times
lots
now.
of points embedded in it.
Why should
and I'd
Canadians
like to
have faith in
respond
you
to
when your
those.
own agency doesn't?
The witness, please, to answer the questions.
Yeah, I'd also like to point out that Conservative senators have been reprimanded for bullying witnesses, and it would be terrible to have that kind of behavior.
Your Prime
here in the
Minister
House.
has been reprimanded for bullying strong women in his own caucus for standing up to his corruption.
So let
please spare
me
us
let me
the
now
lecture.
speak about housing. And let me first point out that there is an internal contradiction in what the Conservative members of this committee have done when it comes to voting and their purported
irrelevant to
scheme
my
on
question.
housing. Actually,
Point
I
of
believe
order,
that your
Mr. Chair.
votes are very
Point of
relevant.
order.
There has to be,
Question
you
was
have
clear.
to stop interrupting.
Yeah.
Stop.
Finished
I'll
answering.
I'll move on. It's my time, and I only
No,
have limited
I'm
time.
afraid actually it's time for
so,
questions and answers,
Minister-
MP Howland, so I would like
Minister,
to answer.
This is
Because
the
I have
reason
things
why,
to say
and
about
this is
housing
exactly
because
the
we have a
reason
plan.
why your non-answer proves why Canadians and your own housing agency has no faith in your government to
Point of order.
meet the target.
Point of order.
What this
Point of order.
proves is that the Conservatives do not
not a
want to
point
actually
of
listen
order.
to the
Point of
answers.
order.
Not
The
a point
point
of
of order is
Just letting everybody know that the pausing and the sometimes,
the
stuttering
minister not allowed me to
is
speak.
That's
I
not
have
actually
right
a part of
to
the
make a
video.
point
It's
of
not
order.
the
Now I'm
stream.
being
Your stream
interrupted
is
and heckled
fine.
during my point of order.
It's
Please, Chair. Please, I'm
Parliament's
asking you.
recording of this video.
Minister Freeland has the right to respond to
This
the
is not a
questions that
point
are
of order,
put
Mr.
to,
Chair.
and this is not. This is
Do
a
your
point
job.
of. Now I'm being heckled.
Okay.
The witnesses have.
Here's okay.
I will move on.
MP
I can't,
Lawrence and MP
Chair.
Howland.
This is descended so badly now that I'm being interrupted during my point of order.
Yes. Okay. Members, first off, stop the crosstalk. Okay. Stop the crosstalk.
I'll
And the
move on.
other thing is, MP Howland, MP Lawrence, any MP is we have interpreters here. You know, there's a lot of screaming going on. If members screaming into the mics, I think in my opening remarks I explained the danger, the health and safety to our interpreters. So I would ask, that is with crosstalk, that is with screaming, that is with not having respect and decorum here in this room. I think that is what we want.
Point of order.
Yeah, we are looking
Point
for
of order.
respect and decorum. Point of
Please
order,
don't
MP Lawrence.
crosstalk. And I raised my voice at a reasonable tone, and you did not recognize it last meeting. So that's why I have to raise my voice, because I'm hoping you'll hear me, Chair.
I can hear you, MP Lawrence.
Chair,
I can MP
Chair, with respect, I'd like to move on to my next question. So we can agree that Canadians and your own housing agency don't have faith in your government, which they've already outlined. And that's why after your government spent $89 billion on photo-op funds for housing promises that have not been actualized, rents, mortgages, the amount of down payment needed on a house there before your government, and it certainly won't be there afterwards. Canadians are living in a housing hell and a cost of living crisis. 2 million Canadians are going into a food bank in a single month just in 8 years. There's a 100% increase in food bank usage. A third of those kids are and other factors that were caused by your government. The number one reason for food bank usage is because of the housing unaffordability that your government has created. 10 cities across this country, there are nurses living in their cars, there are students living under bridges. That's 8 years after your government. Why should anyone believe that anything that your government has done is actually helping addressing the affordability crisis?
No, the Conservatives cannot be trusted when it comes to protecting the most vulnerable people in Canada. Since we formed government, 2.3 million Canadians have been lifted out of poverty, and our government has particularly. I'm sorry, Mr. Hallen. I'm speaking about poverty in Canada, which you purport to care about and which you purport to have addressed in your question. And I'd like to finish my answer, please.
It was about food banks.
The Canada Child Benefit has had a huge impact on Canadian families and is having an impact today, lifting millions and millions out of poverty, and the statistics show that. Our early learning and child care program. Oh, I'm sorry. You haven't given me a chance to answer, and that is not only rude,
2 million
it's
Canadians are
inappropriate
still going
at
into
committee.
food bank. I'll just ask my last question because my time is limited. Your government promised by Thanksgiving that the price of food would go down. A scathing report driven up also by your carbon tax because you're taxing farmers and those that are shipping the food and storing the food. Those people going into a food bank are increasing because of food costs and housing costs caused by your government. 83% actually that are going to food banks are working families. That's a phenomenon that we've never seen in this country before. So you promised on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving went by, food prices didn't come down. We thought maybe you meant the U.S. Thanksgiving. That went by as well. Nothing happened. It's almost Christmas time, and there's literally kids in this country asking Santa not for gifts, but just for food that they could put on their table. On what date will food prices actually come down so Canadians can afford to eat? And when will you axe the tax so people can put food on their table and heat their homes?
So let me just be clear. I've been repeatedly interrupted, and what we see is that Conservatives are interested in clear. Canadians know that Conservatives only believe in cuts, particularly for the most vulnerable among us. And that is why our government is so committed to supporting the most vulnerable, to supporting children. 2.3 million Canadians lifted out of poverty. The Canada Child Benefit, money directly for the most vulnerable children in our country. And when it comes to housing, the purported subject of this meeting, let me just be clear that the Conservative purported scheme actually would go backwards on housing. It would actually put the GST back on the construction of rental housing that we need. This is not when actually what we need to do is build more homes faster.
Thank you, Minister. The time is up now, and so just on the timing, as members know. Each party has 6 minutes. If a question is asked when there's like 5.5 minute mark or 5:40, and the witness then is answering, the time will go over the 6 minutes. And that is as we have the practice that we have kept here on this committee, and that's what we will continue to keep doing unless the members decide otherwise. And now we are moving to MP Zarowitz, please.
Wanted to see the minister come here not on a government bill, but as part of one of our studies. What I didn't realize was that Mr. Hallan wanted her here to perform a monologue in front of her and not to actually have a conversation. I wonder perhaps...
This is not a point of order.
Perhaps the committee...
This is not a point of order.
Perhaps the committee...
Mr. Chair.
Could invest in some gold stickers or something to assuage Mr. Hallan's ego so that next time...
This is not a point of order. Come on now.
Conversation.
This is not a point of order.
Thank you, MP Blake. the minister
Point of order.
here.
I'm calling a point of order.
Point
You
of
have
order.
to recognize
yes,
me.
Yeah, of course. MP Heller.
It is any member's right to do whatever they would like with their time. And just because, Liberals and the NDP or the minister doesn't like what I do with my time, it's still my time.
Yeah.
So I would hope that you would appreciate that.
It is
We can ask what we want.
It is your
And
time.
if we're not having
MP
an
Heller,
answer given,
it is
we
your
should
time.
have the right to move on.
Yeah, it is your time. We just ask that all members do, use their time, this valuable time that we have with the minister, in a respectful way, and we have decorum here at our committee. MP Zarowitz, please, it's your time.
For being here today. I do want to start off with two things. On the record, Mr. Chair, I also want to say the Conservatives keep on asking our Deputy Prime Minister to attend, but not giving her a chance to respond. So it's very sad to hear that the Conservatives are afraid to hear the facts directly from the Deputy Prime Minister and are willing to talk over her and interrupt her. I don't know why she would ever accept an invitation from us if this is what's going to happen. I'm also going to say I am absolutely appalled that there was an accusation about our Prime Minister being a bully to former female members of Parliament. It is an appalling accusation and completely untrue. Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, I know that there were a number of things that were mentioned by my Conservative colleagues. Is there anything that you want to respond to before I actually get into my questions?
Yes, thank you very much, MP Jarowitz. And I must say, Mr. Blakey was exactly right in saying that if committee members prefer to engage in monologues, then there doesn't seem to be much point in actually gathering as a committee. I do think that it is worth putting on the record that there is a clear contradiction in the Conservatives' purported scheme on housing. Would cut back on the elimination of the GST on the construction of purpose-built rental, which we have put forward and which is already leading to more homes being built. And yet the Conservative members of this committee in the House of Commons voted to support our complete elimination of the GST on purpose-built rental apartments. So I think it would actually be useful to understand the thinking behind that contradictory position. I think it may also be worth me reading into the record a conclusion from an preeminent housing experts, Professor Mike Moffat. He has described the Conservative proposal as, quote, an exceptionally weak response to the housing crisis, riddled with loopholes. And he has gone on to say, quote, this is a sign that the Conservatives don't understand the urgency or scale of the housing crisis. Those are not my words. Those are the words of an independent expert. And I'm now happy to answer your questions.
As you know, the residents of my riding of Davenport, and indeed all Canadians, would say housing is one of their top issues and very concerned about it. Many of the initiatives that we've undertaken, we've heard at this committee a lot of testimony that there's been issues at different levels of government that have stopped many people want to build, from building affordable housing, rental housing. Can you speak more specifically about how you're addressing some of the structural issues that result in the structural shortage of housing supply?
For sure, and thank you for the question. Is the current economic environment, the current macroeconomic environment, and that's why our government is there with support for financing. We want to make the math work for home builders, and that's what we've done. Lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, Professor Moffat estimates that will add between 200 and 300,000 more. That will lead to between 200 and 300,000 more homes to be built. The apartment construction loan program, to which we topped up with an additional $15 billion in the fall economic statement, that program being built. Before the fall economic statement, we announced an additional $20 billion in the Canada Mortgage Bond Financing Program, and that is going to lead over the next 5 years alone to another 150,000 new homes being built. You spoke, Ms. Jarowitz, about also sort of the structural obstacles to new homes being built. And I think we all agree that there is red tape, there are restrictions on zoning that as a country we need to work together to lift. That is where the Housing Accelerator Fund comes in. It is a fund that allows us to work collaboratively with municipalities across the country, communities, to get more homes built faster, and then it provides financing to help them do precisely that. I'm very glad that this fund is being rolled out quickly and aggressively across the country. Already, this fund, and we're going to keep on reaching constructively, collaboratively agreements with municipalities across the country.
Thank you. And then I just have one more quick question. Millions of my residents, not millions, millions of Canadians are going to be renewing their mortgage this year. But whether or not they're going to be able to afford to renew their mortgage, is there anything that we have put into place that's going to be helpful to Canadians at this point?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think all of us as members of Parliament, we talk with our constituents, and I'm sure all of us have heard from people who are really anxious about the renewal of their mortgages. That's why in the Fall Economic Statement, for the first time in Canadian history, we published the Canadian Mortgage Charter. It's very simple. It's in black and white, and it tells Canadians what they have the tailored relief and support they have the right to expect when they're renewing their mortgages. And that is really about being sure people understand the tools that are available to them. A couple of the key measures are people have the right to talk to their financial institution about perhaps extending the amortization period. That could lead to a smaller monthly payment. There is for insured mortgages, you do not need to requalify in order to go and look for renewing at a different financial institution. Again, that's just to give people a little bit more choice, a little more flexibility.
Thank you, MP Zarowitz. And now to MP Samari, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you very much for being here today to answer our questions. I'd also like to greet Mr. Forbes. We appreciate you being here as well. Mr. Forbes, in the second hour, I will be asking some more technical questions about this file.
She does anything she can to try to avoid any questioning.
Minister, I'd also like to get you those questions by email. But just in the first hour, I have some more general questions on housing. First, I'd like to ask the Parliamentary Budget Officer published this morning on your fall economic statement. In Chart 5, there's a chart about spending review, the cuts that are being planned. If I may clarify, when you talk about Table 5, is this in the fall economic statement? No, in the document by the... He's going over spending. $1.3 billion are being cut from Crown corporations, including CBC Radio-Canada. If you've read the news, it says that when you asked for $125 million were announced, CBC Radio-Canada was, of course, very affected. We know that this will undermine the public broadcaster as well as local coverage, and this will worsen the news situation for Francophone minorities outside Quebec. I'd like for you to comment on the situation at CBC Radio-Canada, and can you commit to not asking CBC Radio-Canada to make cuts? Thank you for that question. First, I will say that I don't have the this morning's document before me, the document by the Parliamentary Budget Officer. As such, I cannot give specific answers to that part of your question. But I share your concerns about Radio-Canada. I agree that Radio-Canada and CBC play an important role across Canada. Our democracy and especially public journalism. So I agree with the idea that you included in your question, the idea that Radio-Canada has a specific role for Quebec, for Francophones throughout Canada, for the Quebec nation. I agree with that principle. We know that Radio-Canada has a lot of viewers and a lot of listeners in Quebec and among Francophones outside Quebec. So it's an important entity. I agree with the principles you brought up. I share your concerns. All medias are going through a difficult time right now. The economic situation facing the media is a challenging one, and that is why our government is insisting on further discussions with web giants. I'm not going to specifically talk about what the Parliamentary Budget Officer brought up, but I can assure you that our government and me personally, as a former journalist, we all agree with you about the importance of journalism and its importance to democracy, and we all agree that Radio-Canada plays a special role in Canada, in Quebec, and among the Canadian francophonie. Thank you. So, given you share, if you or the government might make a commitment, especially with 600 jobs on the chopping block at CBC Radio-Canada. Now, regarding when you appeared on C56, I asked you whether your department would provide statistics about what is forecasting for the GST freeze on rental housing. To the best of my knowledge, the committee never received those numbers. So if you could please follow up, I would very much appreciate that. Just regarding the construction of social
Again, I
and cooperative
apologize
housing.
for the video quality. This is the
You
only
have,
copy Parliament has, and
promised
I don't know
subsidies,
how,
but right
it
now
got all
interest rates
bugged
are
up.
very high.
So anyone can go to Parliament
As
and
such,
find this
one
video, and it will do the
possibility
same
would
thing.
be to create reduced interest rates for social or cooperative housing, either through the CMHC or through the federal government. Currently, the federal interest rate, as I understand, is 3.66%. If it were perhaps reduced to 2%, and then the government would make up the difference, then for only 16 million would be paid in interest, pennies on the dollar. So this would really break up the logjam and get things moving. This is just an idea that I would like to suggest. I wonder if you could comment on it. Thank you for your.
I feel like because Chrystia Freeland's in this video,
theory,
they purposely screwed it up so
you
people
are
don't
talking
want to
about
watch it.
the fundamental ideas that underpin almost all targeted housing programs by the federal government. In my opening remarks, I talked about $20 billion added to low-cost financing. Under this program, there would be a lower interest rates What's more, the program to which we contributed $15 billion in the fall economic statement for apartment construction, well, that's exactly what you proposed. This program supports
You know what this government reminds me of?
for
A really
the
bad
construction
employer.
of rental housing.
You go to work, make nothing, and as a reward, they give you a
This
pizza party. That's what this government does. Give you a pizza party.
Create an economic environment in which companies will build more rental housing as opposed to condos. In other words, to change the calculus, because we believe that Canadians need more rental housing, especially the less well-off would benefit from this. Through the program, we hope to build more but among these apartments, there's an affordable housing component as well. So the program would build affordable housing as part of its operations. You are right. What you propose is one way the federal government could incentivize the construction of housing. Thank you, MP St. Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, good to have you here at committee. Last time you were here, we talked about nonprofit projects that were already in stream for federal funding and the possibility of applying the GST rebate to those projects. And I had asked if there were and what the estimated cost of doing that would be. Can you share with the committee when we might expect to receive that information?
It's a good question. It's something that we are looking at. I will say, though, is to put in place policies that will lead to new projects being put in motion, for the obvious reason that it's good to have incentives to create new projects rather than to be adding on the incentives to projects that are already in train. And I would like to take the opportunity to say I have looked carefully initially on your motion on the financialization of housing. And as I'm sure you have noted, one of the points that you raised in your motion was around the short-term rental business. I hope you have noted, and I'm glad to do so publicly, that we have subsequently acted in that area. I think it's a really good point. And I think all of us who care about the housing situation, we're focused on getting more homes built. That's a good thing. But it takes a while to build a home. And the great thing about the short-term rental, which you yourself pointed out, into the longer-term rental market, that's progress. So I just want to say thank you for singling that out for attention.
Fair enough. And I would just like to underline again that some of these nonprofit housing projects that have successfully been awarded federal funds aren't proceeding because of higher interest rates, hence why be built. What I'd like is for the committee to have the information on what those projects are and what the estimated cost would be of extending the GST rebate to them. When can the committee expect to get that information?
Good question. Something certainly worth looking at. And one thing I would also say to all MPs here is we're all familiar with projects in our own ridings. If people would like projects that they think are worthy projects that are running into some obstacles, do please bring those particular ones to my attention.
Absolutely. In the meantime, I'd just like to know if your department has run a list of those projects and estimated the cost of applying the GST rebate to them.
So as I've said, a very worthwhile question. I do want to emphasize everyone, there was strong support. I quoted Mike Moffat, but not just from him. Strong support across a lot of people that it's getting more homes built. Everyone, obviously, would like easing tax measures to be retrospective, and there are a lot of people talking about that. As I into the future so that we can create an incentive for even more homes to be built. I am happy to talk to people about specific affordable housing projects that are in a challenging situation right now.
Right on. Well, we would be happy to get that information. The issues that my colleague Lori Idlout has raised a lot is about housing in Nunavut. And of course, there has been some distinctions-based funding awarded to Inuit governments that operate in Nunavut. But when it comes to the territorial population, because it is a different jurisdiction after all. And the federal government's answer has always been for the territorial government to apply to national Indigenous organizations to access that funding for their territory. But there is clearly a need for more resources for the territorial government that's been estimated around $250 million. Is that something your government is looking at announcing in the next budget?
I'm not making any budget announcements today, for sure. Very happy to continue discussions about areas that it would be good to focus on in the budget. And I will say, just to your specific question, our government believes, as I hope everyone here does, that a distinctions-based approach is really important. It's an important part of reconciliation. Of good conversations with the governments of the provinces and territories across the country, very much including Nunavut. And I think we need to be doing both. We need to be having conversations on both of those paths.
But you do recognize the difference between Indigenous government and territorial government and the need for both to be adequately resourced in order to meet the housing needs of their population.
And that's an important part of reconciliation. We also recognize that one of the important things on housing and a plethora of other issues is for the federal government to work constructively with provinces and territories across the country, very much including Nunavut.
That is the time for our first round. So we are moving into our second round. Members, as we always do, we do not have full time for a full second round, but we did start a couple of minutes late. So I'm looking at between all parties, each party will have approximately 4 minutes now with the minister to ask questions. So we'll be 4 minutes per party on the second round.
Christmas, Minister. Welcome back. Mr. Forbes, congratulations on your new role.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Chambers. And I do want to say, I thought Mr. Lawrence was going to ask me a question, and I was going to take the opportunity to say Merry Christmas to his son James, who's here with us.
Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas, James. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Minister.
Minister, 250,000 Canadians have opened a first home savings account, as I understand. Can you provide to the committee how many deposits have been made to those accounts?
Let me start with a correction. It's actually 300,000 Canadians who have opened first home savings accounts. And says is there are 300,000 Canadians, by definition, principally young Canadians, because it has to be for your first home, who have actually who are actually saying, I want to buy my home and I'm saving money for it. That's really positive.
Can we get the amount of deposits to those accounts, Minister?
Well, let me just start by ensuring that we're all clear that it's 300,000, not 250,000. That's a material difference.
So you'll commit to providing the committee with the deposits?
I am always happy to update Canadians on the first home savings account, which our government put in place, which was opened in April, and makes a real difference for Canadians and shows young Canadians, 300,000 of them, believe in saving for their first home.
Thank you very much. The mortgage charter. Uninsured mortgage holders don't have to go through the stress test. Insured mortgage, why are we not giving the same relief? Why is your government not giving the same relief stress test on a renewal. There's 1.2 million, at least 1.2 million households that are insured mortgage holders.
Again, Mr. Chambers, and I don't mean this in an argumentative way, but you have it the wrong way around. It's insured mortgage holders who don't need to. It's insured mortgage holders who don't need to requalify.
I apologize.
That's an important distinction.
It is a very important. It is a very important distinction, and I apologize for mixing that up. At least 1.2 million uninsured mortgage holders.
So it is important not to confuse the two because there's a very big distinction. Insured mortgages, by definition, are insured, and so that means that but I'm underscoring this because the initial question was wrong, and when you talk to OSFI and the regulators who are responsible system, they make a very clear distinction between insured and uninsured mortgages, and that's the reason for the different treatment.
Thank you very much. But by definition, uninsured mortgage holders are less likely to default because they've provided at least 20% down.
Clear on the responsibilities that our superintendent of financial institutions has for guaranteeing the sanctity of the Canadian banking system. And as Canadians, we should be really proud that we have a safe and stable banking system. I have a lot of respect for our institutions, and I always will.
Thank you, Minister.
Insured mortgages, by definition, have an insurance policy that backstops them. That creates a very different impact on our financial system.
I appreciate your response.
Thank you.
The Canada Growth Fund is supposed to be an independent arm's-length fund. At the first investment of the Canada Growth Fund, when PSP Investments is supposed to manage this fund on an arm's-length basis?
So I'm, of course, very familiar with the structure of the Canada Growth Fund because our government created it. And it was our government's decision to structure it as we did because we know that the professionals at PSP know how to make investments. And
do you show up to CPPIB investment announcements?
The CPPIB is very differently structured from the Canada Growth Fund.
Well, they're both arm's length.
Well, the CPPIB also has a provincial role. So the CPP and the Canada PIB and the Canada Growth Fund are entirely different in their structure. The Canada Growth Fund was created by our government. It was our idea to structure it as we did. I believe there is a race in the world for
Thank
investments
you, Minister. I appreciate
No,
I appreciate
you didn't give me a chance to finish, actually.
The Canada Infrastructure Bank.
That is the time. So,
A brief point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
As generally, it's my understanding that we should get time and respect to the amount of seats we have in the House, especially when it is administers, as I've raised this point of order before. It should be Conservatives getting 5 minutes or at least 6 minutes because we have considerable more seats.
So MP Lawrence, I'll speak to that, and I think listen. So I will speak to that, and it has been the practice for 2 years at this committee that when we do not have enough time to do a full round, that we, in a very cordial way and, amongst parties, are able to then share that time. That is what we are running up to against that time right now. So that is why, before we started this round, I said that each party, because we didn't have enough time for a full round, would have chambers, as we will do with the other members, and that is a practice that it is up to the members, but that is a practice that I feel has boded well for our community, I believe, for our committee here. And but members, if they think otherwise, they may decide otherwise. But okay, right now we're continuing.
Just a brief point of order.
We're continuing with the way that we've always done it.
Just a brief point of order. Yes. I'll reserve on that with.
Thank you, MP Lawrence.
On that point of order,
yes, MP Morantz.
At 11:45, there was 15 minutes left, which would have left enough time for 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 2.5, and 2.5, which would have been the
breaking up a full second round. We're eating up time here, actually, as we speak. But that would be breaking up time from what is a conventional second round, which has a full second round, has 5, 5, 2.5, 2.5, 5, 5. And as you know, we have not been super stringent in terms of cutting people off right at the minute. Actually, I've given a lot of latitude and a lot of leeway to be able to have more time, so we can have fulsome answers and discussion here. So, on that, but that could be a conversation for another time. At this time, I think members want to get to ask questions of the minister for the precious time that we have right now, and I'm going to go to MP Weiler for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and special thank that we're doing on the financialization of housing. And it's important because housing is absolutely top of mind for all Canadians and certainly my constituents because we've seen the rising cost of rent causing stress and many feeling like they're not going to ever be able to afford a home. And so, Minister, I was hoping you could speak to the work that our government is doing to build more homes in my province of British Columbia.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mr. Wheeler, for the question. And as you know very well, BC is one of the provinces where the housing crisis is the most acute. And I think we are all rightly very focused on that. I do also want to take a chance, since we're talking about BC, to thank the provincial government of BC for their very program. They're a great partner for us, and we very much have BC in mind when we're designing housing programs and are try very hard where we have shared objectives, which is pretty much everywhere, to build programs that work together. One example of that is our measures on Airbnb and short-term rentals. And we looked at what was the toolbox that we had at Finance federally that we could use to help strengthen the BC measures. And I must say, I was very pleased to read in the Toronto Star, a real estate agent quoted over the weekend who said that he is seeing a real change in the housing market in Victoria. And he attributed that to people who had been holding apartments as short-term rental, understanding that is no longer economical, and releasing them into the market. Cracking down on short-term rental can provide immediate relief in some of the most stressed housing markets in the country, including BC. Just last week, I was in Vancouver at a project for the construction of affordable housing. 231 units in the downtown east side. And what I'd like to particularly point out to this committee and to the Canadians who may be watching us is I first went to that project 2 years ago when it was empty land. And by the way, the people building those homes were really proud of the work they were doing. They went out of their way to say it really gives them personal satisfaction to be building affordable homes. These are really nice places. A lot of them have beautiful mountain views. A unit for starting at $500 a month. And I saw a 2-bedroom, which was really nice, for $750 a month. Of the lifting of the GST on purpose-built rental and the impact of the addition of an additional $20 billion to the Canada Mortgage Bond Program. We definitely need more apartments in BC, and those two programs will lead to a lot more being built. Thanks.
You, MP Weiler, that is the time, and now we're off.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to inform you that I will be sharing my time with my friend Mike, who will be expressing certain very important values. So please stop me after 2 minutes, and the remaining 2 minutes will go to Mike. Madam Minister, regarding housing, your measures on Airbnb were great. Land management to use federal land for social housing. Witnesses came before the committee to remind us of the need for an acquisition fund to take current rental housing off the market so it can be sheltered from the financialization of housing and remain affordable.
This video is absolutely dreadful with all the pausing and stuttering.
Fall economic update. I got the sense that you stole certain ideas from the bill by the Conservative leader, stating that if municipalities don't build enough housing, you will cut infrastructure funding to them or other funding sources. That I'm quite concerned about. With interest rates, we have seen housing starts reduce greatly in
That's
Quebec.
exactly
That's not municipalities'
why Pierre
fault, but it
Poilievre
is
does
leading to
not
delays.
talk
I'd like
about
for you
too
to
much about
clarify-
his plans, because every time he does, the Liberals steal
Off
an idea.
transfers to municipalities if they
and
don't
they
build
take
enough
credit
housing.
for it.
Thank you for that question. You touched on a lot of different points, so I'm going to just make one point about the use of federal land. Owns a great deal of land, but so do provinces and municipalities. With a collaborative approach between the federal government, the provincial governments, and municipalities to agreement we signed with the city of Kelowna. Kelowna will be contributing the public land it owns. I think this is a good idea that we can work towards together wherever possible. Regarding our approach to municipalities, with municipalities, we understand that they are facing difficulties. That is why we set up the Accelerator Fund for municipalities. We have an asymmetric agreement set up with Quebec, so it has its own housing agreement of $900,000. We are in negotiations with municipalities. We are bringing mayors throughout Canada to the table. We believe this is the right approach. Yes, the federal government does have one point of view. Oh, okay.
Yeah, somebody is sharing time, so MP Morris, please.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. St. Marie.
You being here, I'd like to ask about needed investments in housing from the federal government. Starting with a recognition that back in the 1970s, 40% of all housing starts had federal assistance. Liberal and conservative governments have reduced funding to the point that's partly caused the crisis we're in. Our current social housing stock, as you know, is 3.5%. CMHC has called out the $3.5 million affordability gap by 2030. And the governor of the Bank of Canada has said that investments in housing supply are not inflationary. In fact, the opposite. Yet in the fall economic statement, we only saw $100 million new dollars, at least in the next 2 fiscal years. Can you comment on what the hesitation from your perspective is in not putting in place more ambitious investments in housing to at least start by, say, doubling social housing, which would only put us to the middle of the G7?
So look, thank you for the thoughtful question. And I would just say, I think we agree on the objectives and the need. And I would point to the really aggressive approach we've taken in housing since the beginning of this fall session. Completely eliminating the GST on construction of all purpose-built rental. That was a very big step. We did that in September. Adding really big step. I am already hearing from builders across the country that will lead to more purpose-built rental, including affordable housing being built. And with due respect, and I don't mean that in a snarky way, I mean that in like a really serious way, the adding $15 billion to the apartment construction fund, that is making a difference right now. That fund was initially had $25 billion. $17 billion has already been committed. And so what we did in the fall economic statement is add another $15 billion. So it's $40 billion in total. And that money, like, putting that money in there is having an impact right now, because people, when they begin 23 or the beginning of 24, it takes them a while to have the plans, to have the permitting. And now they know that there is money in that fund that they can apply for and build their plans around. So that is money that's going to make a difference today. But that's actually true. It's really true.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And now this will be our final questioner of the minister, and this will be MP Blakey. You'll have the final time.
Minister, in your opening remarks, I think, or one of your answers here so far, you made reference to the new mortgage charter. And I'm wondering if you could explain for the committee what the legal consequences of a financial institution disregarding the mortgage charter are.
Financial institutions, it's been, and I would say, a cooperative approach. What we have found is financial institutions actually share our government's view, and I'm going to presume here, but I don't think much, your view. Institutions do not want people to lose their homes. So we believe that the mortgage charter is something financial institutions are able to abide by and supportive of, because we developed it together with them. Because I at least have found there are elements in there that people just don't know about, and not knowing about it is causing real stress and anxiety.
But there are strictly speaking, no consequences for financial institutions disregarding the charter.
We actually have been stepping up, as I know you know, our enforcement abilities in the financial sector. We are now setting up, and this is something that consumer finance NGOs have been calling for a long time, a fully independent ombudsman that Canadians can go to when they have concerns about their financial institution. That has never been the case. Financial institutions have been able to pick and choose. We're creating a fully independent ombudsman. I think that's going to help people.
Just creating more government. That's all they're doing.
Document?
Bigger
the charter
government.
is published here by the finance minister. Canadians can see it and refer to it. They can use it when they refer to the ombudsman and to the Consumer Financial Agency of Canada.
On the question, I'm going to take that as a no, unless you tell me I'm wrong. I am curious in this question about the stress test, though, because it does seem to me that requiring somebody who has an uninsured mortgage to renew with the same institution, even if it's a higher rate than other rates that are available in the market, is probably not very helpful unless the goal is to increase the odds of default for uninsured mortgage holders. So can you explain why the decision was made to move ahead eliminating?
So there is, of course, and I know you know this, there's no requirement to renew at the same institution. The distinction is if you have an insured mortgage, you do not need to pass the stress test again. I think that gives people comfort. Another consideration that I think we all need to bear in mind is the safety and security of the Canadian financial system overall. That is an important consideration. That's something that the Superintendent of Financial Institutions is principally charged with. But we take his opinion seriously, and Canadians, you know, the Canadian financial system and the institutions. 2008.
But on that point, like if Joe has an uninsured mortgage with Bank X and he wouldn't pass the stress test, he can get a mortgage at a higher rate with Bank X again, which is not going to be better from the point of view of making his mortgage payments. So why would we require him with an uninsured mortgage to have to do the stress test to get a lower rate, which would actually make it more likely that he doesn't lose his mortgage? I don't understand why we would make it harder for someone to get a lower rate while allowing them to renew at a higher rate with the same institution. There's a circle that doesn't square there for me. Perhaps you could shed some light on that.
Our intention is to provide comfort. First of all, to reduce the anxiety, and also to help give them options and tools that allow them to stay in their homes. That is what the mortgage charter is about. I would also say, as we all know, the key issue here is the interest rate. And that is why, and we haven't really been talking about it, although it's been the subtext of our entire focused on doing our part to create the financial circumstances that allow prices to stabilize, such that
basically, the richer you are,
rates
the
can
better
move
of
from
interest
their current
rate you're going to get.
contractionary position. And I think we need to economy, and particularly anything to do with housing.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. Thank you, MP Blakey. We thank you for your testimony, and also thank you, Deputy Forbes. Although you'll be sticking around with us for the second hour, and but we thank you for your testimony. And so, members, we are going to suspend for 5 minutes as we transition into our second panel. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a load of crap. To me, the system's just there to keep you poor, is all it is. I don't see any real help or any real measures to help anybody that they're saying or talking about. I mean, if you got a lot of money, you benefit from every part. But if you don't have much money, you get screwed. You get screwed by the government, get screwed by the banks, get screwed by everybody. Alright everybody, I'm going to stop the video there because it is of the worst quality I have ever seen. I will leave a link in the description so that you can go back and watch the video from Parliament yourself. And if you could survive watching all the stuttering and pausing. But for now, I'm going to cut the feed off and I'll put the link in the description. Have a good Sunday, everybody. We'll see you later.